Susan, welcome back to the ocean series, I should say. I mean, it's like you are probably like the person I've crossed the ocean, like, I think the third time. This is the third
I think
time,
so.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm flattered.
And it's always like an incredible, fascinating journey. Like, it's like every time I start conversating with you, there is so many things that um, we can discuss, and it's like it literally flows like beautifully. And like I always find myself like that maybe an hour, 2 hours have gone by, and it's like, oh my God, like,
That's why I keep coming on the journey.
yeah.
It's like, where are we gonna go today? This is gonna. Who knows?
So talking about journey, what we're gonna do, because you've been like on the ocean series like already like twice. The last year I interview you, so I'm gonna have this kind of approach where I would like to know what have you been up to in the past year. So it's like like the sailor that go like 1 year to sea and come back, a story to share. So I would like to do the same with you. So I have like three major like area of question. Well, the first one is
Okay.
this: we haven't seen each other in a year, and in transatlantic terms, you have spent a year at the sea and now like harboring again at the Vegas Lia Awards. I want to draw like inspiration from like the words of like one of my favorite actor, like Dennis Hopper. He say, our eyes are hungry all the time, and they had to be fed with color and lights and flash and humor. So you had to keep like feeding your eyes and your soul with art and poetry and films and people having fun, because having fun is an art too. How did you feed your eyes this year?
Ah, well, it's interesting because when I came here last year, I had just gotten COVID for the first time and was getting over it. So that was interesting. And the only reason I knew I had COVID was because I was giving a party at my house for a lot of people, and I'd just come back from Chicago.
Okay.
Which for some reason, Chicago and COVID love to dance together. And so
Really?
I had a little sniffle, and I thought, I should probably, for the sake of everybody else, because I live in this little teeny
Just like
country
test.
town. It's like, and I'd be damned if I didn't have COVID. And it didn't hurt or anything. But what happened was I ended up, I guess COVID triggers autoimmune issues.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting psoriasis,
Okay.
which was bizarre. And I mean, it wasn't like, a little, I mean, head to toe, I looked like a burn victim. And it was a very strange moment because I was like, I guess this is how I'm going to live,
Oh, gosh.
And I'm going to have this like skin thing. Okay, so I went to the dermatologist and they gave me some medicine and diagnosed me and whatever. And I was like, but I had come to terms with this spotted, weird body was going to be
Right.
the next part of my journey. And I would have thought I would have been petrified, but I wasn't. It was really a strange thing. I was just like, okay, this isn't interesting. Looking at the cards, I'm like, well, that's one I wasn't expecting. And,
Right.
kind of testing how I felt about vanity and all that. And I wasn't as disturbed as I thought I would have been if you had told me this was going to happen.
Right.
And then, thankfully, your body is a miracle. I mean, it's amazing, and skin in and of itself. And after 4 months, everything went away. But it was
It was related to COVID?
huh?
Was it related to COVID?
They said that COVID is a lot of things trigger
Triggered that.
these kind of things. But I mean, I'm still taking medicine for it. But
Right.
talking about opening your eyes, it was a really curious thing to not be debilitated by something that if you had told me what I was going to go through, I would have been like, I know. But that was interesting. And then I'm shifting jobs, which has been, I'll be 61 in a couple of weeks. And it really, there is
You look super young.
I don't know. I just have my face scanned by somebody, and they were like, "Your skin's way older than your age."
No,
I'm like,
no, no,
"Thank you." I think she just wanted to sell me a really nice package of services. That's what I'm telling myself. But yeah. So there's some big, that felt like an age thing, and then the switching jobs it's fascinating to let go of something you've built over the last 8 or 9 years. And think about where it's going. And I don't have children, but I thought maybe this is what it feels like when parents see their kids drive off in the old car packed for college, and you just see that car going, and you're like, well, that's a chapter, that's moving on. And coming to terms with letting go of things and watching them blossom and hopefully, continue to go on. That's been an interesting sort of internal growth for me, I think. And then, this new job, I actually feel a lot of the things I used to feel when I first moved to New York, of like, what is it? What do I do? How do I help? What can I do? So it's been a really.
And the job, sorry, just like for our audience, the job is like as a consultant for the Interpublic.
Yeah, the way I chose the title creative advisor, because a lot of these, the natural thing would have been global chief creative officer of Interpublic. But I have this sort of rule that I've applied to myself is anytime I take on a leadership position, I have to be willing to commit to 5 years. Because I feel like when you're asking people to follow you and you want to try to build something less than 5 years, it's insignificant. So, at 61, I was like, I don't know, 5 years, that's a lot of life, when you think about percentages. And so I thought, creative advisor is where I can take what I've learned over the past 30 plus years, or if we want to say 61 years, and help people hopefully get to places faster, be a support, for people on their journey.
Are you a person that plan ahead a lot, or are you someone that's like find planning kind of like, I wouldn't say useless, but there is that saying that goes like, I can't even plan like the next 5 minutes. Like, there is a
I'm not
whole
a planner.
school of a philosophy in life that says like, just live the moment. So like all you got, it's like that moment in front of your nose and nothing else. I remember watching a video, an old video, black and white, of Henry Miller. And Henry Miller used to say that, like, all we got is that moment before our nose. Just leave that. So like, there is no planning. But do you, because now that you mentioned the 5 years.
Yeah. Well, the 5 years is sort of like I don't want to do that now because I think I am trying to be more in the moment because I've earned it. It's like,
of course.
When you're younger, you do have to plan. I'm glad that I made some decisions when I was younger that were much more about what is a path to the future. But I think I've earned the freedom to do exactly what you said. And I heard this thing years ago, and it's helped me a lot, which is don't fight. Well, they didn't say it this way, but this is how I say it, which is don't fight the river.
Don't fight the river.
Don't fight the river. So you're in the river, which is here we are in the water.
Right.
I'm sticking with the theme.
I love the sentence. Don't fight the river.
Don't fight the river. And I learned this lesson when I was probably 12 or 13, and we used to go tubing down the rivers in Tennessee and the Carolinas, and back when we didn't wear helmets, we didn't have life jackets. We had a tube, we had an inner tube
made of rubber, right?
Yeah. It protects you from the rocks. And so we would get in these inner tubes, and the only advice we got was if you get sucked into an eddy, kick your feet up to the sky and don't fight the river. And the river will shoot you out, and you'll be okay. And I'm happy to say that I've followed that advice, and it works. And I think it works in life, too, is that you don't want to be present in the river. You don't want to be stupid. But when you're getting pulled in a direction or something feels uncomfortable, don't fight it. Just sort of go with it and see where it pushes you. So I really enjoy the spontaneity of what next,
Of course.
Where are we going next? What do you want to do?
That's beautiful.
And jump in.
Okay, look, I hear see changes, shift perception, and rebuild beliefs. And I think you just mentioned this, right? Like the belief of, I would have never expect to react to the set of cards that was handed to me in that sort of way. Now, every day is an opportunity to learn and to build upon the greatest, creative act, which is life itself. Now, Oscar Wilde once say, if you know what you want to be, then you inevitably become what you want to be. And that is your punishment. But if you never know what you want to be, then you can be anything you want. Now, have you become what you wanted to be, or do you still don't know what you want to be?
I don't know what I want to be.
You still know?
No. My first memory of wanting to be something is I must have been like 4 years old or 5 years old, and I remember singing in the bathtub, like I was making up a song, and I was like, I'm going to be a songwriter. That's what I'm going to, like 4 or 5 years old. And then I got kicked out of the choir, And I was like, I guess music's not, that's not it. And, you know, I've kind of, I've always been drawn towards creative arts, dance, theater. For a long time, I thought I wanted to be an actor. And then,
A theater actor or
yeah,
like
stage.
stage? What got you into theater?
Well, I started dancing, you know, performing through dance early on. And then I guess through high school, I mean, when I was, you know, middle school, I guess 6th or 7th grade, I started to do, you know, performances not only in the schools but also in the city that I grew up in, Greenville,
Always
South Carolina.
dance or like
No, acting.
acting?
Yeah.
Which play do you like the most?
Well, the first one that I did that was not of the school was Happy Birthday, Wanda June by Kurt Vonnegut.
Right.
And I played Wanda June. And, you know, it's like in 7th grade, and there's like a 3-page monologue that she has to do about getting hit by an ice cream truck with a drunk driver, but it didn't hurt because it was like a bee sting. I don't know. And I remember one night I was halfway through, or maybe a third of the way through, and I forgot. I just went cold.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know how to pick it up. I have to go back to the beginning of the monologue to get to where I am, to know where to go next. And so I was like, how do I do this? So I don't tap dance, but I kind of tap danced and did the whole monologue in my head till I got back to where I was. So I did a little tap dance and turned around, and then I went, and got back to where I was in the monologue. And then the reviewer had been there that night and said, well, sometimes she adds a little too much to her performance, you know, trying to...
So I thought it was part of the performance.
I was like, sir, the only option other than that was for me to say, I don't know what I'm doing up here.
This was during high school.
I think I was in 7th grade.
7th grade.
Yeah.
So you had a theater club.
This was it was called the Warehouse Theater, and it was a avant-garde theater in the town of Greenville.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I loved it, but I was working with real actors, and their life was hard. I mean, you know, we would show up and we wouldn't leave, you know, the theater till like midnight. And I mean, these were adults. It wasn't like my high school friends that we were doing it for, 3 days. It was like a run of a show.
You know, the best definition of an actor, I think, it was given by Charlize Theron. She said once, actor are emotional athletes. And it's true. I never really thought about it. Like, you know, the fact.
I think what I loved about it the most is you got to be somebody else.
Yeah.
And it was so wonderful to step into that character and leave whatever baggage you have and who you were, which, you know, I'm still a work in progress, as your question said. It's like, I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know what's next. I mean, I think there's another chapter. I'm
jealous of that, because I'm actually, when I was pinning down this question, and I knew, of course, like these Oscar Wilde quotes. For me, is exactly the opposite. I always knew, there was never any other option rather than being a writer. Since I can remember.
Yeah.
Almost like there was tabula rasa, everything around, and I think it kind of became a punishment. Like, you know, I knew it was easy because I never had to struggle. To say, I could do this, I could do that, was never a question. It was always like, I'm gonna write, that's what I'm gonna do. And like, you know, along the way I lost like years, like, you know, because I shift language, so like from Italian to English. So there was like 10 years, an entire decade where I lost my identity. But then I regained again, like a couple of years ago, like when I took my English to a certain level. But yeah, it had become a punishment though.
But you're a beautiful writer, so.
Yeah, but it's a But what do you think, now that you touch theater, like, gosh, like I'm so obsessed with theater. One of my very first, like, American play that I read, it was like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Oh.
And then I watched the TV transposition with Richard Barton, Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah.
Oh God, I was like, I can't even like.
I love
so
watching that
beautiful.
performed live.
Oh God. And at that time, I think I read that she had one of her husband passed away, or she had some problem doing like that play. And but what a beauty! Like that story is beautiful.
Yeah. It's interesting because every once in a while, you know, I will get the writing call sort of thing. I do this thing. This is more to your first question, but I started doing this thing that I love writing for myself. Like that when somebody goes, you should write a book or whatever, I'm like, ugh, that doesn't interest me. But just writing. So I started doing this thing when my friends have children, that I look at the dynamic of the child being born into the family and think about that behavior. Like my assistant, who's much more than an assistant, she's she's half of me, but she's brilliant. But she just had a baby, and in her marriage, she has a stepson and a stepdaughter. So now little Miles has a half brother and a half sister that are older. I mean, they're like 7 and 5 or something in there. And so I wanted to write a dynamic of what is it like to be a half sibling, and then I go to this store in my little town of Millbrook, and there's this woman, Jennifer, who has this store, and she has just the most beautiful taste in things. And so I go and look at what stuffed animals she has, and then I start thinking about a story. So I've got the sibling dynamic, or the child's dynamic, and then I have these toys to start a narrative about. And so I buy the stuffed animals, and then I write the book. And this one I love because it's about a lion, a zebra, and a giraffe.
I think like you mentioned that you were writing like last year, that you were writing like this kind of like little paragraph, little stories.
But this one is slightly different. But it was the lion. The lion's the youngest, and then there's the zebra and the giraffe, and they represent the 3 children. And one day the lion is really sad. And they're like, "What's wrong? You seem down." And he goes, "Well, I just realized that you all are herbivores, and I'm a carnivore."
I like this analogy.
Meaning they're slightly different.
Of course.
As much as they're a family, they're slightly different. And it's like, and there's a good chance I might eat you.
Oh wow! I like this a lot.
Because it's in my nature. And then they have a whole discussion about how do you surpass what's in your nature. And so he at the end he's like, "Okay, I won't eat either of you, but I can't promise that gazelle's not going to be a meal one of these days."
Have you completed the story, or have you written like?
What, that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
It's
I finished that one. So they have their animals and their story, and then Danilo Bauer, who's my creative partner at FCB, he's had 2 children since I've known him.
Right.
So I've had to write 2 stories for him.
What's your process in writing? Like, you normally, how long does it take you to write like a story like that? Do you normally have a first draft, which is a dump, and then you go in there and start like, chiseling?
No, it's more. I don't like for that one. I knew I wanted it to be about a lion,
right?
For some very cute reasons,
right?
Because where I think little Miles was conceived. I think he was conceived in Cannes. Sorry, Jackie. But so I knew I wanted that to be part of the story. So I'm always about, and I think it's why I like advertising so much on My Best Day, is that it's succinct storytelling and everything has meaning. So I don't like the randomness of things. I'm much more like symbolism and what things stand for, and that there's story behind the story behind the story.
But the act of writing, normally, like, how does it happen within you? Like, you sit down, you write with your handwriting, you write at the computer.
I can't handwrite because I can't read my handwriting.
Okay.
And so it becomes a disaster. The first thing I do is I almost do research. So,
Okay.
like, I would go and look at everything that happens in Africa.
Right.
In the animals, in
Trying
the jungle,
to
whatever.
acquire, like,
Trees, the
knowledge.
foliage, the thing. Just feed
Your head.
stuff. So not unlike AI, right? I mean, I'm pulling just crap.
Everything.
Just stuff. Sorry, AI, for calling you crap.
Right.
And then I let it kind of simmer. Like, it's like almost cooking. It's like, okay, this
like
stuff.
a stew.
Yeah, this stuff is in here. And that's when I get frustrated because sometimes I call it procrastination, but
it's not.
But I really think it's percolation.
Yeah.
And things are like the herbivore carnivore came at 4 a.m. while I was asleep, and I was, I guess, semi-awake, thinking, what is the story between these three animals? And then all of a sudden, I remember waking up laughing. And once I have the story in my head, then I start fleshing it out. And a lot of times, what I do is, it's kind of embarrassing,
No,
especially if
okay.
somebody's at the house, but I tell a story, like around a campfire. So I record it.
Absolutely.
And so I go, okay, so there were these animals, and they lived in the jungle. And so I tell the story, like the oldest oral way of.
That's the way to do it. You know, Chuck Palahniuk used to say, they asked him once, like, how do you know if what you're writing or the story that you have in your hand is good? They say, well, I have a technique. I go to parties, and then I try to inject myself in the conversation. And I start telling the story of the book I'm writing. I don't say that it's the
Yeah,
book. I just
yeah,
tell the
just-
story. Then
I do that
halfway
too.
through, I just stop and go to the bathroom. I take a piece. I come back. If they ask me, so what were you saying? I know I have a really good
That's
story.
brilliant.
If
Yeah,
they
yeah.
don't, I know that's not that interesting.
Well, and it's interesting because before I really get into writing it, and I've heard the opposite, which is don't tell your story before it's written,
Yeah,
because then it
sometimes,
doesn't feel. I don't believe that.
It-
I like telling the structure of the story, almost like a joke, like a short thing, and then, like you said, if you get a laugh or a
Right.
moment, I'm like, okay, I'm going.
For me, like I've been writing this novel for like a year. I had to literally completely change my approach because all my life I've been writing poetry, which is a totally different approach.
Right.
But for the novel, I'm basing the protagonist of the novel on a friend of mine that I know. So from time to time, I grab a coffee with him just to try to get like more information. He's a neuroscientist out of him, so he's the one truly like that is feeding me a lot of information which otherwise I wouldn't know because, like, but I think it's not very different from method acting anyway.
Yeah.
That's what actors do when they have to, like, create a role and, like, Daniel Day-Lewis for, like,
Yeah.
There Will Be Blood. Like, it took him, I think, like 6 or 7 months to create the voice in his head
Yeah.
of this man. Like, I think, like, we as a writer have the same process.
Yeah. Yeah.
You really
That's
have
why
to get
I
into that.
found theater, writing, even
Oh, it's
and
beautiful.
advertising, they all blend together. You're using similar skill sets. It's interesting. I'm not going to remember the guy's name, but he does a podcast where he interviews writers, and he just asks, what's your method, what's your style, and it's fascinating how different, and then how alike. Like,
He's a young guy, right?
yeah, Doug.
Yeah, I
Grant,
think
I think.
I subscribe to his channel. I don't remember his name, but I know what you
I
mean.
enjoy them a lot.
It's
And they always
amazing,
start with a cocktail.
Yes.
They make a cocktail, and then, but it's interesting because the way that I do, and mainly I just write short stories that are usually for children. That's my favorite
The favorite
place.
angle, yeah.
Yeah, just because I think I love like Aesop's fables, and
Right.
just they and also they're doable. I think if I was writing a novel, the way I approach the writing that I was telling you about, I don't think it would work because I think I think probably some of the most curious novels are ones where the writer doesn't quite know where it's going, because it starts. Anytime I've done something longer form, half the fun of it is going, I did not know we were going to go
Yeah,
there.
but about that, I attempted to write a novel, like, I think it was like 3 or 4 times in my career, right? And I always stop at like around page 50 because I didn't know where I was going. Last year, I was watching an interview with Brad Easton Ellis, and he was talking about like his technique how to write, and he was telling that he spent like at least 6 months or 7 months like working on the outline. Like none of those words gonna go into on the novel. It's
Right.
just the outline. So I took that approach, and I literally worked. I think it was 4 months on the outline, and I kept like cracking the outline. And when I felt that it was like good foundation,
Yeah.
then I started writing. And now it's the very first time that I got like to page 200, and it's literally
That
like
that makes more sense to me, but I do, when I was listening to this podcast, it was fun to hear some of the writers saying, I don't know where the characters are going to go. And I thought, what a
that's true.
cool
Like,
sort of, and again, the don't fight the river sort
Don't
of
fight the
saying
river.
is like, even if you have that outline, you might want to just be open
yeah, no,
enough
that is definitely
to
true.
go, oh, but
Because
we're going here.
That is definitely true because, like, I have to, even when I had my outline in place, I have to change a few things, like, along the way because sometimes it's true, like, your character, you want it to move it, like, to the left, but he doesn't want to do, doesn't want to take that step, and it's true, it's almost like, is a natural for like the character to do that kind of thing. So yeah, and I think that Aaron Sorkin, I remember, like always says, like don't judge your character, empathize with them. Like
Right,
you know,
right.
the worst thing you can do is like start judging your character. If you are writing about villain or you're writing about like a bird person, like don't judge it. Like
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So yeah, but you know, there was also another writer, Richard Elmore. It was like an amazing writer, and I remember one morning he got into this interview and it was kind of snappy, but I remember he said, you know, at the end of the day, if you are a writer, you come to me and you ask me what's my method, then like how do I write? You're wasting your time because everybody's different, everybody
Yeah.
has his own thing. What worked for me doesn't work for you, so don't waste your time asking me for advice because there is no advice. And I found that like true. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, you had to create your own method. You can be inspired by other people, but I think whatever works for you, as long as you get the story down,
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
The ultimate thing is get the story out of your body onto the page. How you do it, it doesn't matter. It's like what they teach you when you do pull up, right? Get the chin over the bar.
Yeah.
How you do it doesn't matter, but try to get it over the bar. And then we take care of the form,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Same thing.
Cool.
Okay, third question.
Okay.
And the last question.
Oh.
Jose Alvarago became his first person in record history to survive in a small boat at sea for more than a year. On November 12, on November 17, 2012, Alvarago stuck his small motorboat, 20-foot fiberglass, and set sail that took him like to a 30 hours deep, like, you know, sea fishing trip. Now, having spent much of his life at the sea, he created a survival routine, storing rainwater, catching anything that he could catch. He built a routine to survive. Have you built a routine for yourself to survive this year? I think like in the well, not only this year, but let's say it's like you have been in the industry for a long time. You have survived many different waves, right? Have you throughout this year built like a routine? It could be a mental routine. It could be like something that you always try to do wherever like a new job comes along, but something that is the foundation of Susan.
Yeah. Yes. And it's funny, it was when we were talking about the paycheck.
Right.
I would say my entire career I lived below my means so that I would never need the money.
That's a great advice.
And, you know, like the apartment that I have in New York City, my husband and I have, we bought that in 1991. And I can tell you my salary in 91
Right.
wasn't what it was
Of course.
10 or 15 years later. And we were like, should we move into a fancier place? Should we do, you know, and we're like, why? Why do we need that?
Yeah.
And if we do, we give up financial freedom. So that apartment in New York City has been my access to freedom. Because I always said the worst case scenario in my life for living, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, that's survival, right?
Right.
The worst case scenario is I have to live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Which is not bad, so a bad
And I'm
thing
like,
to do.
that is you know, because the apartment was so cheap back then
course.
that it cost me very little to live
You
there.
still have it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I won't let it go.
Of course.
Because it's my freedom. It
Yeah.
is, I have lovely things in the world now, but if I felt caught, trapped, miserable enough,
That's where you go
I could get rid of everything
and get there.
and have that, and life would be just fine.
Right.
And that, having that has allowed me to be brave. To, you know, when I took the job at Leo Burnett in Chicago, I'd never been to Chicago. I'd only worked at BBDO. I didn't know, like maybe the only place that I could succeed was BBDO. I didn't know what happened in other agencies.
Right.
I'd never been a CCO or thought I could be a CCO. I was like, well, that was crazy for us to leave something that was so secure to go on in this adventure. But I had that apartment in New York, and I was like, if it doesn't work out, it will have been a, you know, we jumped off the high dive and it hurt. But we jumped, you know, we tried it. And the same when I moved back to New York. It was like, you know, I felt free to make decisions not based on money. And as someone who didn't have a lot of money growing up, that freedom to not worry about it that's the survival for me.
That's a great advice, because like I think like also like in a very capitalistic society as like the United States, it's very difficult to adopt that kind of like behavior. But I'm the same. But I grew up in a different like environment, so like
Yeah.
I come from Europe. So I think like, but I notice in the States and also like with younger generation, there is a tendency to live above the means.
Yeah, I had a partner who had the opposite philosophy. This partner believed that the more vulnerable he was financially, the harder he would work. And I was like, that
Oh,
sounds
wow.
horrible. I was like, but we were great partners because we were so different. We were so
Right.
complementary. But I was like, no, if I put myself in that situation, I would just be scared. I would be scared to do anything.
Yeah. No, because there is a clear moment in life when you reach a certain kind of state that you don't really need more. Like, you know, it's like if you have a house and it's okay for you, yeah, you could have a bigger house, but do you really need a bigger house? No, you
Yeah.
don't. It's all about, like, I think one of the hardest thing to do in America, because it's so ingrained in the mindset, is to slow down the hustle
Yeah.
and tell yourself, I'm okay. I get to the point where I wanted to get. I don't need to chase anything anymore. Like, you know, I think like it's a very weird thing to say in the States, because you are like, you know, because people normally are fueled and motivated by the chase. If there is no what's next, what's the next rung on the ladder,
Yeah.
then it's gonna be a problem.
I'm going to talk about that a little bit this afternoon,
Yeah.
which is how generous is your definition of success? How much have you put towards exploring the concept of success, and what does it really look like? And if it's just title, power, and money,
Yeah.
I can tell you,
It's limiting.
It's not bad, but it's not the only.
No.
It's not the only way. I was talking to a friend of mine who became a coach, and he was coaching a lot of heavy hitters in the financial industry. And he was like, Susan, they're so unhappy.
They are.
They're
yeah.
so unhappy. And they have all the stuff, but you still feel empty. And so that is I think it's a really interesting question for America. You know, I look at some of my family that they're you know, they have humble jobs. They do fine, but they're so happy.
Yeah.
Their lives are so rich, and I don't think we spend enough time defining.
Contentment is really something that's very hard to attain. I mean, look what happened to Jim Carrey, right? As an actor, it's an amazing, unbelievable actor. And like a few years ago, he started slowing down, like, you know, retiring from acting, or like. And then when he was asked many times, why is not like chasing the next big role? It was like, I'm okay, I'm done. Like, you know, I'm done. Like, I don't need more. And people were like completely puzzled. Like, you have this reaction of people almost being confused, because when you are into the race, the global race of, like, you know, chasing, and someone come along and say something different, you have that moment of almost like you are bewildered. You are like, oh my God, what are you saying? Like, I
Yeah.
don't understand. Like,
And to
you know
me,
what I mean?
it's just evolving
Yeah.
and growing. And I don't think that the first part of that desire to have creature comforts and extreme creature comforts
Right.
is. But I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me about, you know, this boat and this thing, and I was talking to another friend who's younger than I am, and he's like, I want a jet, and I'm just like, and he's not being funny, he's being serious, like,
Oh, God.
and I was like, just one jet? I mean, don't you want more than one jet? And all I could think is, something's happened to me over 6 decades, which is, I didn't find it like, I wasn't like, I'm going to be so jealous if you get a jet. I was like, this is exhausting. Like
It
just
is.
listening to them talk about what they wanted, I'm like, it's exhausting.
Anyway, Susan, can't thank you enough for being like such a great guest for like
Ah.
the Ocean Series. So wish you the best, and like
Thank
I know you
you.
arrived yesterday,
Yeah,
so have a great stay and like
Thank
a
you.
great jury.
it's always
Thank
good
you.
to see you.